right, good morning everyone and welcome to Innovation Bay. This is our regular Wednesday morning event series. I'm your host again, Ian Gardner. I'm a co-founder at Innovation Bay. I'm also a VC with Diligence Ventures. Also on the Innovation Bay team, big call out to them, Fade and Stow, my co-founder, Shan, Claire, Sam, CJ and Alison. We are all working really hard to support and connect the startup community across Australia. And again, I said this before, but I've got this beautiful webcam from Hudley. So I want to say thanks to Sam and our other half, Paul, who equipped me with it. So check them out. Finally, this is a sad day because Cheyenne Priest, who has been our general manager for the last 3.5 years, is leaving us today. She's been an amazing addition to the team and has done some amazing work with us to build Innovation Bay and I guess more importantly, the entire startup ecosystem. So I think we all owe her a huge debt of gratitude. So Shan, thank you. I know whatever you do next is going to be super impactful, and I'm sure you'll be a core part of the community going forward. So thanks again, Shan. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. If you haven't been on it before, is Hopin. So we'll tell you a bit more about the platform that we're using. Afterwards, we can do some virtual networking. We'll explain a bit more about that later. So now, if you are new here, I know there's always some new people. So Innovation Bay, we're the longest running community group for founders and investors across Australia. Our mission to support founders really on their journey from idea to IPO and beyond. We do events, programs, other content like this, our podcast. We try and enable people to connect, learn and grow with each other. I said we'd talk a little bit about Hopin. So this is the platform we're on. It's, I guess, designed to be a little bit like a physical event. You can choose where to go. We're going to have the panel up here on the main stage. But afterwards, we're going to be able to break out into some networking, meet some people that you may not have met before. It's a lot of fun. And it actually adds a lot of value to the experience. So hope you can hang around afterwards to do it. We will finish by 9 o'clock with the main session and hang around for half an hour afterwards. It's really good. Always a big thank you to our sponsors. I couldn't do this without them. So AWS, KPMG High Growth Ventures, IAG, Farmark Ventures, and Macquarie Bank. They support Innovation Bay and the entire ecosystem. So massive thank you to them. Excuse me. Yeah, so about the topic today. So look, board, a lot of people think about boards without necessarily knowing too much about it. So if you are listening today and you're an expert, please ask some questions. And if you're not, then please ask some questions. I mean, reality is a board of directors is an important, it's legally important for a number of reasons, but it's also structurally important to try and make decision-making better. So for any founder, you should be thinking about this and the best way of structuring it and using it. Boards really can help establish a baseline of success for a startup and bring the collective experience and expertise from the board members to guide the startup. The challenge can be that startup boards versus a sort of ASX board may require a slightly different approach, and they have different challenges and responsibilities to the bigger organizations. So again, reminder, there is a chat function on the right-hand side. So if you have any questions, please put them in there and we will try and get to them. Right, let's bring up the panelists. So Catherine, Peter, Kajal, hopefully you're there. Just if you could click join and come up on stage with me. Oh, let me stop my screen share while I do that. There we go. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Ian.
Peter. Hey, Peter. I'll do a quick intro. I know Kajal was having a couple of technical challenges earlier, so she may join us, but for now we'll start with Catherine and Peter. So Catherine, you are the founder of Bright. Bright and CEO, Bright. So Bright believes that every family deserves access to a sustainable and comfortable home. You're basically a lending business for, energy. I mean, that's where you've started. So that's kind of that. We'll let you explain a little more in a second, the full story. You've got 20 years background in investment banking, mostly with Macquarie, I believe, and other financial services. And you're also a board member at AFIA. Peter seems to have left us for a sec, but I'm sure he'll come back. Peter is the chair of various ASX listed companies, including Drone Shield, Nearmap, and Macquarie Telecom. as well as a number of unlisted businesses. So Peter's been around in the ecosystem for quite a long time. So we've been buddies for, I don't know, 10, 15 years, Peter. So it's good to have you on the show and to see you again. Right, while we're waiting for casual, we might just jump straight into this one. Peter, I might start with you, given you're slightly more experienced than the two of us on the panel. Being polite there. Hopefully you're hearing us, Peter. Can you hear us all right?
No, I can hear you.
No. You can.
A lovely chat.
Well, I'm going to start with you then, Catherine. So, I mean, you've been a board member. In fact, why don't we start quickly with a little bit more about Bright? I offered you the chance to do that. So tell us a bit about Bright and how you got into that.
Okay. So at Bright, as you mentioned, we help every family access a sustainable and comfortable home. And we do that by helping the vendors of energy and home improvement products have access to Bright's products at their point of sale. And so we help them take a finance application, which helps them with their cash flow management and removes the upfront costs to that household being able to buy what they need. So we've been in business for about 3.5 years. We financed over approved over $500 million of home improvement and home energy equipment in that time. And so we've got over 6,000 sales agents who are using Bright at their point of sale.
Yeah. That's great. And Peter, are you hearing us now?
I am. How are you doing?
Thank goodness for that. We've got some technical gremlins this morning. We've had a pretty good run the last few weeks, but anyway, welcome back. And yeah, I was just getting Catherine to do a quick intro to Bright. So maybe I'll do the same with you, Peter. So, I mean, do you want to just give us a little bit more context about you and how you ended up as this sort of professional non-exec?
Sure. Ian, look, it wasn't an intentional outcome, but I started in the tech industry, I say 100 years ago. I did a computer science degree. Almost feels like 100. So I've been active in the Australian tech industry for decades as a CEO and as an NED chair investor, and these days full-time. I only do chair roles, but I typically put my money in. Been a long journey, been involved with companies, CEO Computer Power, long-term NED, 13 years of IONET, currently chair of Nearmap, Macquarie Telecom, Drone Shield, 2 others, pretty much all in tech, and then a few private companies as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure some of that those stories will come out as we get into this, but let me maybe start with the first question to you, Peter. So, I mean, what do you think the role of a board member, and specifically within a startup, is, and compared to an advisor or mentor? You know, because you get your day-to-day responsibilities that, you know, for a board member that ASIC requires, but then your your more loose advisory mentor is a bit different. So just maybe some context around that, if you could.
I'm here.
Peter, did you hear that? Oh.
Just lost again, unfortunately.
Oh, what a shame. Catherine, do you want to, I don't know whether you've got any perspective on that. I mean, have you done the official AICD or similar course?
I haven't done the AICD course. It looks like it's going to be you and me, Ian.
Yeah,
I think
that's fine. Yeah.
No, I haven't done the AICD course, and you know, to be really honest, when I started Bright, I'd never been on a board before. So setting up Bright's board was the first time I'd been been on a board. So, you know, it was an interesting learning curve for me. But I did surround myself with people who had done the course.
Yeah.
And I have been able to get, people in the team to do the course as well. So that's definitely been useful. And I have their book about the roles and responsibilities of directors, which I've read. But it's been a time issue.
I mean, to that question then on, the difference between being an official board member and a more loose advisor or mentor, I mean, have you got any perspective on that? Yeah,
I do. I think, in my world, it moves so quickly. And I think that, there are certain needs that I have within the business as far as relationships or problems that you're solving. And I've probably learned that sometimes it's better to have a relationship with someone that's not in a formal capacity as a director, but more in an informal capacity, potentially as a mentor or some type of advisory person, because often the problems that you're solving may not be really long-term problems. They may be something, 6 months or so, 8 months or so. And so to appoint someone on the board to help you solve a specific problem, I think can be a little bit short-sighted potentially. And so, so my preference is, to actually appoint someone more as a mentor and advisory outside of the board. Our board, in fact, is not made up of any independent. It's all investors.
And so, but how long is that? Do you think that'll last? Because at a certain point, if you list, for example, then, I don't know how far away you are from that, but the trajectory you're on, I'm sure you'll be able to list. If listing involves being worth, 200 mil plus, then you're probably getting there. But when you get to that point, do you think that opinion around independent directors and the use of the board will change?
So we're definitely starting to look at independent directors, in the next 12, 18 months. And so, for a few different reasons, not for IPO, but just at, broadening the skills that we can have on the board and the expertise, and to be honest, I'm chair as well. So I'm director, I'm chair, and it's quite hard being chairperson, founder, CEO.
Yeah.
So it'd be great to bring some external expertise in there. Yeah. But up until this stage, I think the path that we've taken has been right for Bright. I think every company has different ways that it'll need to go. Yeah.
Peter, are you with us again?
I'm with you. Unfortunately, I can't hear Catherine, but
no,
maybe so maybe we wing it and hopefully
all right,
I'll try and read Catherine's lips and not double up. There we go.
We were just talking about the difference between being an official board member and a more loose advisory board member, and the various stages of the business that might apply to. So, you'll have been through all of that, and I'm sure you are informal advisor and mentor to many. How do you view the difference between your official, ASIC regulated board roles and your less
just lost you, unfortunately. Can you hear me?
I thought I was articulate. Yeah, we can hear you. Look, Peter, if you can hear, you can't hear us. So I was going to say take your headphones out, but yeah, we have technical gremlins. Well, despite my very articulate question answering, I might going to have to ask you another question, Catherine.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the run sheet here. Are seed stage companies too early to have board members? Again, maybe when you were a bit early in the journey, because you did start the business 3 or 4 years ago. How did you think about the board structure back then?
Yeah, and I can talk to that a little bit. So when we started, for the first year, we took no external funding, so there was no board in place. And then once we took external funding via our seed round, it was from that point that we then started. We introduced a board, and we took on a chair and a director from who were majority investors from the seed round, and so. So how I think about it, for me, I think it was appropriate to be able to have that board structure in place post-raising external funding. Pre-raising that external funding, I didn't, for my situation, I didn't feel I needed a board. I was able to reach out directly, being at Stone and Chalk, to anyone where I needed a problem or needed access to strategic relationships. So I did that just directly. However, implementing the board post-funding was appropriate from a corporate governance perspective. And it was a great way to start to learn, how boards operate. I was really fortunate that I was able to bring on an experienced director as my chair, who was also an investor. And his expertise really gave me a lot of confidence in understanding how to operate a meeting and what the governance protocols were. And he is a director on several ASX companies.
Cool. Now, Peter, are you Well, thank you, Catherine. You're back with us. There's a few questions in or comments in the chat that we're wondering if it's your headphones that are playing gremlins with us. Do you think it's that?
I'll try without headphones.
Yeah. Are you on an iPad?
I got everything, Ian. I got everything.
Yeah, how's that? Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me, Catherine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm not sure I can hear Catherine, but I can hear
That's
Ian,
okay. I
so
can lip read. Yeah.
Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, so let me jump back to the original question. I'll do it quickly so you can try and get an answer out. So, yeah, just your thoughts on the difference between being an official board member and an informal advisor or mentor.
Yeah, look, I saw this question, and obviously at one level there's a fundamental difference because you've got the governance issues of a formal director, but look, to the folks out there, my view is as much as possible, you only want people there that are aligned with you in terms of what you're trying to achieve, and whether that's in a formal sense, advisory or semi-informal advisory, totally informal mentor, or even as a board member. I mean, all of the governance, ASIC and everything else, that's table stakes, but it should not get in the way of running a business. I mean, governance to me is a lot about common sense. But you really want people that are there for the journey and as best as possible get alignment of purpose, because having been a CEO of all sorts of companies, some bigger listed companies, being a mentor, minder, director, investor, it's that alignment of purpose that's most important. I think diversity of skills, diversity of approaches is also important, but you know, there is that difference. Once you go on an ASX listed board, which is, you know, where I live part of my life. But at the end of the day, it's about how do you help the executive team, the founders, the management grow the business sustainably, successfully, given the table stakes of being all the formality of governance and, you know, which just seems to be getting bigger, but don't let it get in the way of real business.
And I mean, is there a cap on the number of companies you can be involved with? I mean, I think being a chair of an ASX board, I mean, that sounds to me that's going to be more work than, you know, being the board member of a seed stage startup.
I mean, it can be. And again, you know, again, to governance, the proxy advisors who, as the folks there get bigger, we'll get to know them. They don't like people being overboarded, and I am proudly overboarded. I think I'm probably the most overboarded ASX director in the country, being chair of 5 companies. But, you know, a lot of them are small. They start small, they get bigger. To your point, Ian, sometimes it's the small private startup companies that take most time, and companies go through journeys. Like I've got one, we're about to do an IPO, we're announcing this morning on the ASX. So that's been a massive amount of work over the last few weeks. Then it'll settle down for a while. So I wouldn't put one versus the other. What you want, if you can get it, is a director and advisor. I use the term always on, someone that is there, and when they're awake, they're available to you. Now, you know, I know that's not easy, but if you've got people that are interested in what you do, they should be there when you need them. Yeah.
All right. No, that's good insights there. All right, let's get a different question. I mean, do investors get an automatic board seat? I mean, these are some of the questions we often get from founders when we're looking to do an investment. I'm thinking about it too. I mean, so like, what's the relationship between an investor and taking a board seat? Catherine, maybe I'll start with you, and then Peter, I'll jump in with you.
Yeah, I think investors' interests should be aligned with the founders and the companies that you want to accelerate the growth of that company as fast as you can. And so I think that investor, you know, has one hat where they want to protect their capital, but the other hat should be they want to support the company's growth. So I think it is really a discussion, firstly around can that investor's skill set add value to accelerating the company, not just protecting their own capital. So that's probably one consideration. And so I think if there is, a huge alignment and ability for that investor's skill set to add value to that company, I think that it could be a consideration then for the founder to consider if that investor could be a director. However, I don't think it's an automatic assumption that if you invest in a company, you get a board seat. Different considerations. It depends on how the shareholder agreement's structured, and I know on our own agreement, we had 32 seed investors come in. So,
how many was that? 32?
Yeah, 32 seed investors.
Wow.
So, I think, you may kind of have a structure where there are representatives of certain rounds, or you may have, a certain structure where X% holding entitles you to a director's seat, but that director may not even join the board themselves. They may appoint someone who's better able to add value to that company and accelerate that growth. So I do think it just depends on, on the situation.
Peter, could you hear any of Catherine there?
Unfortunately not. Apologies,
See if he agrees with me.
That's all right.
Asking the
We're
same
testing your lip reading here. Yeah, maybe I'll ask a different question then. It came in from Jackie Feeney, so thanks, Jackie. Any downsides of an investor coming in as a director? Because again, both sides have got this pros and cons. As a director, you think you're protecting your investment, but in many ways you may not be. But are you adding value? So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you just answered it. I do see directors that are there protecting their investment, their pitch, their patch, but is that what is right for the company at the time? Hopefully it is. But if you've got someone, shall we say, in a corner, and I see it, for example, let's pick a term dilution, where some investors, they just don't want to be diluted, where, by raising capital option plans or whatever, whereas what the company really needs, a growth company, is some good solid investments and cash, a great option plan to grow the business. And that's where, I go back to what I said earlier, Ian, about alignment, trying to get, sometimes, you've got to take the money when you can get the money, but, really try and get alignment. And when you've got 3 or 4 directors each there, looking to protect their own patch, it could be when they want to exit, it could be on capital raise, it could be on dilution. That's when it is very difficult for the founders to navigate it.
Yeah. Have you got any horror stories of investors coming onto a board when they shouldn't have, and bad outcomes happening?
Look, I'll pick one going way back because it's sort of lost in time, but there is a great Aussie company called IONET that most of you would know, that I joined back in the days shortly after Michael Malone founded it in his parents' garage. And then, we grew it to about 300 million, and then almost lost the company with the share price got up to, floated it, share price to $3. Bought Aussie Mail, the whole thing tanked, and we were down to 50 cents. And by the time we relisted, we had to voluntarily suspend. We woke up and we had some investors on the board who'd bought 19%. And that was quite a complex, difficult time for some time until we worked that through, and eventually enabled them to exit. They made money out of it, but we could get the business, the board and the whole company back to stability. But it is, I think one of my learnings, you need cool heads. When you've got putting a board together, it's all great to get your flash names and people that are there for the good times, the ribbon cutting, ring the bell and all that stuff. You want a board that's there for the bad times. And you always have bad times. I've never seen a business yet that doesn't go through a rough time. And I try and build up some sort of social bond between the board, the founders, breaking bread, glass of wine, a bit tougher in the COVID times, but, having those social dinners, getting to know each other, be friendly but not friends, so that when it does hit the fan, you've at least got something to fall back on and to draw on.
Yeah. Lots of questions coming in from the audience, so thank you, everyone. Let me ask another one, and I might throw this to both of you, but it's from Shamar McLeish. I might have pronounced that wrong, but what type of formal agreement should be in place for advisory board members? any good resources you can point us to. So again, this is not your official, ASIC regulated board, but your advisory board. So let's maybe talk a little bit about that. Any thoughts on that, Catherine?
Yeah, I've never had an agreement. I've never asked someone to actually formally be a mentor or formally be an advisor or put a formal agreement in place. So I rely on people from time to time, and probably quite extensively from time to time, but I've never put an agreement or formalized that. So, the only formal relationships I have are with the directors of our board. So yeah. I'm probably not equipped to answer that. Maybe Peter's better for this one.
Even though we can't hear you. Because you have, I know for a fact that you have some good advisors out there, like, Mike Cannon-Brooks is an investor, and I believe he's quite active with you. So, is there anyone else, like how useful have those relationships been in your growth trajectory?
Oh, Mike's, unbelievably fantastic. So ever since he came on in the seed round, has been a fantastic supporter and advisor, but he's also been a very large investor. And so, whilst he doesn't sit on the board, Jeremy, who heads up his family office, sits on the board, but Mike's very, very engaged. Just because of that investor relationship and that shareholder relationship, once again, I've never, formalized that, but I have found that I would never outgrow Mike. So his experience and depth of experience. Whereas, as I mentioned before, startups move very fast, and other problems that I've had, in the seed stage of the business, when I think of 2016 or 2017, those problems, the problems that we're going through now are very, very different around scaling, accessing new markets. And so, I've always been a bit gun shy, a bit reluctant to formalize those relationships, but I have been lucky with Mike. That's relationships formalized through a, shareholder agreement, and he's always many steps ahead.
Yeah. So, Peter, we were just talking about the role of, formal, using quote marks, advisor or mentor. Have you seen formal relationships put in place, or is most advisory and mentorship just done on an informal basis?
It can be all of the above, and it really depends on the circumstance. I've just been working on one, it's a semi-formal advisory board because it is leading up to an IPO. So it's there with intent. And when you've got something like that, and you've got the risk of being a shadow director, and this is quite removed from, an informal advisor, but it's an advisory board where, you've got, semi-formal board meetings and you are leading up to an IPO, then you do, I think, need to put in place, the appropriate governance structures of, deeds of indemnity and, formal contracts, etc. Because, if something does go wrong, highly unlikely, but, you can be then in a position of being a shadow director. So, it's horses for courses. And look, it also depends on the people around you, the circumstance, how you feel about the business. But once you're getting, particularly when you start taking other people's money in significant amounts, and, you're leading up to a Series B or an IPO or something like that, then I think something a little more formal is probably appropriate. But if it's just a general advisory mentoral role, that can be a handshake.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about remuneration. So, Peter, I might start with you in this one. How much should, and again, wearing, I guess, the non-ASX hat, if you can, but how much should an external board member get paid? And what other compensation have you seen? I think equity or some sort of share options is the norm. So, yeah, some ideas on that.
So look, I'd make a comment, whether it's whatever the company, ASX, whatever the size, startup all the way through, it goes back to being aligned and why are people there? I use the term skin in the game, and again, whether that is a public company or a tiniest startup. Certainly in a private company, when you say how much should a director get paid, I would say not much. cash is king in all businesses, particularly smaller ones. So, I think the bona fides of the people, they should be there, hopefully to invest, certainly not take any money off the table, or very little, but take it in options, shares. That's what I always do, if you believe in it. And also, I think if you want to be authentic and have a seat at the table, you can't do that if you're sort of just taking money out and not part of the game. So, quite a few, the smaller companies I'm involved in, I will put a bit of money in, but then, what I want is alignment of skin in the game. So as the company gets big and we make money for shareholders, that, one day when we're having a celebration, everyone feels good about it because everyone's made some money out of it. And in the tough times when you're running out of money, you feel, pro rata as much pain as everyone else.
Yeah. Catherine, do you pay your directors?
No, and I'm really lucky because, like, on my board now are my major shareholders. So Airtree Ventures, Grok Ventures, and a group representing the seed investors. So yeah, it's as Peter says, alignment, skin in the game. They have skin in the game. They have alignment, and they have great strategic experience and skills. So yeah, there's never been a request for salary or for even for ESOP, because we're all there, skin in the game, accelerating the interests of the company and all shareholders.
Yeah. Look, again, I'll put my investor hat on here. I'd say I've never seen it before where an investor would take fees, certainly in cash terms. That's pretty unusual, and it would be pretty unusual as well if you are an investor to be taking options or a part of the ESOP. I think if you're a separate expert from a different field or from the same field that you want, but is not an investor, and that expertise is looked for, then a good way of rewarding that person would be in options rather than cash. To Peter's point, I think cash is just too precious a currency for any startup. So especially at that early stage. All right, there's loads of questions coming. This is awesome. This is from Jackie Feeney again. So what are the common skills sought from directors to complement founders or startups? Peter, maybe I'll start with you in that one. So yeah, like what do you bring with your grayer than some of us hair that that others can't?
Scars on my back. What you're looking for, you used the word complement, or Jackie used that term complement. So I think skills that the founders don't have, perhaps experience. I always like to get around a founder people with operational experience. It's great to have accountants, lawyers, etc., but there's nothing that beats people that have done it. And I think culture, people that want to be there. The term that is really close to my heart is lack of ego. You want people that are there genuinely with a degree of humility, no matter what they've achieved, to help the founder, because it is the toughest gig in the world, being a founder. The excitement, but the loneliness of it. So there's a few thoughts, Ian. I think operational experience and lack of ego would be two that I'd put out there.
And Catherine, you're in that sort of pretty super fast growth trajectory, so you're kind of having to, build the house or build the road as the car is speeding down it. So like, when you're thinking forward to what you might need in the next 2, 3, 4 years, like what skills would you be looking for in the next board members that you're thinking of?
Yeah, historically, it's quite broad skills that people have added. And so, as I mentioned, I didn't have that experience around the governance and the board structure and protocol. So I learnt that pretty quick. And so it's not that skill now, I think, that we need as much as, so it's adding value around funding rounds and, introduction of further relationships. So you can really accelerate a funding round when you have those, where you have others on the board that have those relationships, is my experience. And then with recruitment and scaling. So as you grow, I think whilst you're a unique business, there are common problems that you have compared to other companies that have been there before. Recruitment, I think, is a big one. And organizational structure. So I think, someone who has been a part of these companies that grow very fast, scale very fast, and could really help preempt problems before they happen, and really understand, how you could remove some of those pain points before they happen. Potentially also would be a deep understanding in one of the aspects of the business. So, for us, if it was energy or if it was finance, or debt funding. So being able to have like a deep expertise in that area, and in that area having relationships and knowledge would be really useful in the future. A lot of the skills you can buy. So I wouldn't look at bringing someone on with skill sets that we could effectively pay for. I think it's skill sets that you wouldn't be able to pay for, or ones we'd like to try and bring in-house.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Peter, any thoughts on that one?
Sorry, what was, I didn't hear Catherine. So
sorry, I forgot about that. Well, actually, let me ask a slightly different question then, which came in from Anna Zam. And Peter, I'll throw to you first, and then maybe I'll get you to answer this as well. Catherine, how do you do your due diligence on potential board members if you don't know them in a personal or informal basis? Any key points or questions to ask? So, Peter, I don't know whether you've ever been invited on a board that you haven't really known the people, because ultimately there is a relationship game. So tell us about that if you could.
Yeah, look, that relationship is fundamental, and I think it's up to the chair really to blend the different skills, because you do want different views. You don't want men or women. So you do want that, differing skills, differing inputs. Look, it's like anything else. It goes back to what I said before: try and break bread, talk to them. Do your DD, talk to people, see what they've done. Perhaps, have them come on as an advisor first before you, take the leap. But, as I said earlier, I'm involved in many boards as chairs, and part of what I have to do is take the diverse set of skills and ideas and make sure they're all aligned in and around the CEO and the team, to support that growth. So I think the role of chair is pretty fundamental here as well, because I'm a cat herder. I've got to herd the cats and just try and understand each individual, where the shareholders, and look, it's got to be alignment around shareholders ultimately, who hopefully the founders have a significant piece of equity. Although sometimes I see some stories where over time they've lost equity. But I think having a really good chair who can herd those cats and hopefully navigate through those difficult times.
Yeah, I mean, the reality, I'd be pretty surprised, to Anna's question, is it even possible that a board would or a founder would appoint a board member without meeting them? Because, especially as a chairman, I can't imagine you picking up the phone to someone you don't know and saying, hey, join this board.
Never.
Just wouldn't happen.
No, look, you do it through, I do it usually, most of the board members I appoint, or we appoint, come through the network. Who do we know? Who knows someone who knows someone? That's where you get your diversity of ideas, of skills, all the different thoughts. And then, and in fact, one of the big boards that I'm on at the moment, we're looking to put a new director on them. Do we appoint someone in Australia? Do we appoint someone in the US? What does that mean? What's the skill set that will take us to the next level? What are we short on at the moment? What's the cultural fit that we're looking for?
And Catherine, any thoughts on that? Because the punchline really of Peter's comment there is you need to be well networked, but that's pretty hard in this COVID era. So any tips for the founders out there how to get better networked nowadays?
Yeah, I think how to get better networked in COVID. There seem to be even more events. I think now on, Zoom does seem to make it easier to host and to attend more events. So I think, things like Innovation Bay, there's startup hubs. I've seen Stone and Chalk doing a few events. Airtree have a newsletter. So in the Airtree newsletter, there's always, different events that you can join. So I think it's just, keeping in touch with the different VCs, joining and subscribing to different newsletters and looking at the different, what's happening in the VC and the startup, the growth community. And then also I think specifically, if you're in niche areas, so we're in energy and we're in finance or credit. And so within credit and within energy, there are lots of industry groups and stakeholder groups. And like I'm on the Finance Association board, AFIA, and so AFIA is always having different webinars and different networking events. So going deeper in your industry section, industry expertise, and getting in contact there with, the different industry groups and attending different events there online. So, yeah. LinkedIn is always great. So, contacting people on LinkedIn in areas, don't be afraid to kind of ask someone that for a connection with someone that looks like they could be useful, but always personal recommendations. Yeah,
I might jump in this one as well. I use sort of moderator privilege to throw some opinions out there as well. I mean, we've been running Innovation Bay now for almost 18 years. And probably the most valuable thing we do is to bring people together. And I think Peter made this point earlier, that the founder journey, as you'll well know, Catherine, is brutal. I mean, there's limited that's glamorous about it. I mean, if you get your IPO and you ring the bell, then maybe for a few seconds you're doing it, but then you're on to the next set of challenges. And the reality is you want to hang out with people that are like you. And generally speaking, that is other founders, because people in your network don't necessarily get it. Your husband or wife or other half doesn't get it. Your staff don't get it. Your investors in many cases don't get it. Other founders get it. So how can you surround yourself with those people? So, Innovation Bay, we started this thing called Summit Club, which is for Series A and beyond founders. And we've now got 35 members. When we bring them together, I mean, that's really all we do. I mean, we think about it and we curate it, but it's actually one of the most valuable things we have done in our 18 years of existence, because the amount of goodness that's come from that, just with founders supporting other founders, has been amazing. And we're going to roll that out next year into the sort of broader founder community. We're currently doing it for the angel investor community. We're going to do it for the venture capitalists. So I guess the punchline is surround yourself with people. And we've even managed to do it during the COVID era too. So, try and form a group. I think Nick Crocker did a good post. Nick Crocker from Blackbird did a good post on this elephants concept of, getting a few people in. It's like your own private board. So surround yourself with people that count. I know it's a little bit of a deviation from the board question, but those questions that count, because what we see with Summit Club is people post in the group chat, how to recruit this person, or has anyone come across this other person, and everyone helps. So you're kind of broadening your network by deepening your network, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a couple more questions. Where are we? 8:45, so we've still got 10 minutes or so. So there was one on the amount of time, which I quite like, that board members take. I'm trying to work out who it was that asked this one. I can't find it at the moment, so let's ask a different one. So Nicole Santer, Peter, I'll throw this one to you. And I guess we covered a little bit of this before, but more specifically, how do you find board members? If you're a startup founder, how do you find board members?
Look, it comes back to, I'd say everywhere, which means you just got to look everywhere, networking, through places like Innovation Bay, events such as this, through contacts. You just got to get out and talk to people. And I'd say, be slow to hire. Point you were talking about before is, you've got to enjoy, you spend so much time together, you've got to enjoy working with people. That doesn't mean to say they always tell you what you want to hear, but it's really through the network. I mean, you can use advisors, you can use recruiters, you can use whatever, But it's, and look, as a founder, you've just got to be networked. And I know there's no time for that, but, put time into your day, into your life to make sure you meet people. And, I find people are genuinely pretty helpful with the first 1 or 2 meetings. It shouldn't be hard. Have cups of coffee with people, talk to your networks, no rocket science, Ian. And, and also be prepared to evolve. I don't like revolution, but evolution on a board, evolution in business is a good thing.
Yeah. Actually, I found that question that I was looking for, so I might just follow on with you, Peter, on it. So, I mean, how much time and energy does being on a board take? And I know we asked this in a different way earlier, but I mean, what sort of documentation are you expected to read? What, as a board member, what documentation do you expect to see? And how much time is involved in pre, post, during board meetings?
You use 2 words, time and energy. I think the first thing is energy. I mean, you really want people that want to be there. I call it the thrill of the chase. And that's sort of in the person's DNA. And I happen to be fortunate, unfortunate, and I'd like to work with people that are the same. They enjoy what they do. So they've got to have that energy, and then, hopefully with that comes the time and the interest. And, when you get involved in a company, whether it's as an investor, advisor, board person, you're just never sure when your time's going to be needed, and you've just got to be there. Now, we've all got other lives, we've all got families, friends, and, keeping life in balance is important. But I use the term always on, in this connected world. If you're in technology, as Michael Malone from IONET used to say to us, if you're awake, you're on and you're working. Now, I use that term working, you want people that, I don't use the term work because work has connotations of, drudgery and whatever. And look, let's face it, sometimes what we do is difficult. But if you've got a team around you who really enjoy what they do, by and large, and enjoy the great times and hang together in the not so great times to celebrate when it does come good, energy is there, enjoyment is there, and time commitment can be found.
Yeah.
And look, I don't play golf. I think golf and startups, golf and tech just, there's probably people throwing rocks at me down the camera. But
I don't know. I think cycling's the new golf, isn't it?
Yeah.
You are, aren't you?
Yeah, you get to wear a uniform, spend lots of money, and spend your days hanging out with similarly minded people doing a ridiculous pastime.
Oh,
I can say that it's ridiculous because I am a cyclist and I do shave my legs. Now,
you shaved your legs before you became a cyclist.
Actually, not true. I'd resisted for a long time, actually, but then it just became part of the uniform. And it makes your legs look more buff, so it's kind of good. Anyway, this is a very big deviation. If you've been following the chat, as I think most of the audience have, we kind of got our third panelist on there. So Kajal, I know you couldn't join us on stage with some technical gremlins, but thanks for answering all the questions in there. So it is kind of like we've had this third panelist in there. So that's been great. Let's ask maybe the second last question. I think we might kind of get a couple more in. So again, from Anna Zam. And it's around diversity. So, how do you think about board diversity? And that's gender, ethnicity, background, etc. And how do you cultivate that? So, Catherine, I'm aware this panel is 2 white dudes. So, how do you think about this one?
Yeah, because our investors, as I mentioned, our directors are investors. So I haven't chosen them.
Yeah.
So, as far as gender, I'm the only female, but I think we've got, good age. I think we've got great ethnicity, background, I think is varied. But going forward, we do, as we look for our first independent, we do have a commitment, it's documented as well, actually, that diversity is a key priority for the board. So it is something that we will look for going forward. Absolutely just think that that diversity and experience helps the board to be curious, think outside of the box and just look for new ways of doing things. As a company, we're absolutely diverse. Gender's 50% diversity, which is unbelievable for kind of like a credit and finance company.
Yeah.
Age, ethnicity. So we're doing a survey on this at the moment. But I think for me, it just goes without saying at the board level, I have to have that because that's what I live, and that's what Bright is, and how we find that. I think before we start looking for our independent, we will do some work on like a bit of a gap analysis, what it is we think we have, what it is we think we're missing. And then we'll start to be a little bit prescriptive, I think, in our initial search for what we're looking for.
And Peter, this question's evolved over time. I mean, like you've been around in the board space for quite a long time, but I mean, this is an important question. How have you seen it evolve, and how important do you think it is?
Look, I'll answer that in a couple of ways. Ian, look, from a governance point of view, it is big time. The proxy advisors, the ethical investors, environmental, social governance just gets bigger every year. And I was going to say, as it should, albeit brings with it a whole lot of connotations. But if you go back to what I talked about before, and that is having a blend of skills, ideas, complementary thoughts, diversity and inclusion, is pretty fundamental to business. It's obviously fundamental to boards. So, the hot topic is gender, and the great, I was going to say the great news is there's no shortage of, some fantastic women, and I'm on a mission to take old white guy boards and, bring in some diversity and all that means. But it can be diversity in other thoughts, diversity of age, diversity of, as you said, ethnicity. But it's ultimately about putting together a cohesive board, and that doesn't mean that they all have the same skills. It doesn't mean that they all have the same thoughts or ideas. But diversity of thought, idea, skill is fundamental to any business and obviously to boards.
Yeah. All right, we might move on to what I think might be the last question. So, and I'll take it because it's just come in, but I think it's good as well. So Ray Hawkins, thanks, Ray. Look, and it's around the communication, and I'll sort of reframe your question a little bit, Ray, if I may. So a board, and I'm almost putting when I was in my start, I don't necessarily think we ran our board that well, but the board sits off to one side and it does its thing, and it's to the rest of the business, the board can be this sort of black box. What happens there, and how does that actually affect what goes on in the business strategy and outcomes? I mean, is there a great way of bridging that divide? What is the best way of getting that communication from what is decided in the board meetings to what actually happens in the business? So, Catherine, I might start with you and then let you have the last word in this, Peter.
Yeah. So our board, I think, is quite known to the business. So I've had all the board members present at our all hands to the business about what their role is on the board, why they love the business, why they're excited about the vision of the business. And so it really brings a direct relationship between the board and the company. And I think that's really important because people in the company contribute to the board pack. And so they contribute to all this material which goes to the board unless they understand the value of that information, unless they understand, what they're doing and where it's going, how it's being used. I think there's a real disconnect between, the company and this black box that is the board. And I think if you have the right board, they can add so much value to the company, but it has to go both ways. I think the board has to know the company, how it operates, the culture, the values, how the product works. And then the company has to know the skill set of the board, and they have to understand, other companies that they're in and values that they can bring to the company. So I think it's really important to kind of, not keep them too separate, but to make sure that there's overlap and understanding between the company and the board, because that's how you can really leverage, leverage the board's expertise, leverage the board's skills, and, use that to solve some strategic strategic problems
Yeah.
within the company.
And Peter, do you want to give us some sort of anecdotes of really good boards you've been in where there's a really tight alignment between the board and the business, and maybe cases where it could have been done better?
Yeah, look, I was thinking of all the good examples, and I'll try and think of some not so good ones. Look, boards, it should be reasonably seamless, and there's an absolute divide between executive and non-executive, and the CEO is obviously paramount. But if you've got an experienced, sensible board, they should be visible. I mean, I'd like to think in the companies I'm involved in, and some of them are now very big, that I know who the troops are. I mean, I go to kickoffs. Great way, I attend all the kickoffs, and whether they're, say, in Australia or overseas, I just make the time to go and hang out with the people, just as one of the boys or girls. Walk the floor. I mean, how else can a director really understand, or investor, what's going on, unless you can't do it through board papers or board calls or whatever. That obviously means you need an experienced CEO who is comfortable, and there's got to be that trust and respect. I know in my case, anything that I pick up that is relevant will go straight back to the CEO, but I'll have lunch with the execs, talk to the HR director. There's got to be a high level of trust, and it comes back to alignment where everyone is there to grow the business, and everyone is a shareholder, everyone's got options. I'm not sure I can think of any horror stories. If you've got sensible board members, a good chair, and an experienced CEO, or at least a CEO who ultimately trusts the chair, I think it can work very well. Never get in the way of the business, but be there to support it. And I think staff, people want to know, who is this board? Who are they? What makes them tick? And just realising that we're just another group of normal people like them, perhaps with some slightly different skills and perspectives, but we're just there for the thrill of the chase and growing the business.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things we did was, we brought senior management team into the board meetings occasionally, and maybe just ask them to do a quick 5-6 minute update on their part of the business. That tended to work quite well. But I think to your point, Peter, just there is no substitute to being in the business. So if you should encourage your board to come and hang out with you, go and attend sales calls or turn up at the all hands, all that stuff.
Exactly. Turn up at the all hands, talk to the troops. In a lot of my boards, I'll have a board dinner the night before, but I make sure the executive, the 4 or 5 execs are there, and we're just one team. And look, occasionally there might be a bit too much protocol, but look, at the end of the day, there's only one objective, and that's sustainable growth of the business.
All right. Look, I think that, Peter, is a fantastic way to end, because that's a nice positive note. So I know we had some technical gremlins, but because Peter couldn't hear Catherine and Kajal couldn't join, but Catherine, no, that's all right. Don't worry. I think we made it work. I thought the chat was going on really well. Kajal was our phantom third panelist who was done
a great job.
I know. Thank you, Kajal. That was awesome. I don't know whether you'll be able to make it to the networking or not, but look, I'm going to finish off here, but hopefully most of us can hang around, so do try the networking. So Catherine, Peter, I might ask you just to click leave and skedaddle. If you can join the networking, great. Otherwise, we'll catch up with you soon. Let me just quickly share my screen, and I will tell you what's happening next week and whatnot. So that was today. So we're about to jump into Hopin, which is a lot of fun. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you're going to see the sessions and networking things that you can now unlock. And if you can't, just refresh the page, it'll be there. Sessions is kind of imagine it like a table. So there'll be a few people around the table that are talking, but you can also just lurk and listen in. And if you want to just meet someone randomly, click the one-to-one networking. That's a lot of fun. Next week, we're going to have 2 investors and 2 founders on, and it's kind of like a bring bring your mates along. Well, not you bring your mates, but we're asking the investors to bring one of their startup founders along. So what should the founder-investor relationship look like? Because it's pretty fundamental to the success of the business. So we're going to have some great people. We haven't finally identified, but I'm pretty sure it's a GP from Blackbird and a GP from Airtree. So we're going to have them and one of their founders along, which should be a lot of fun. So that's the same time next week. On the podcast this week, we've just gone out with Daniel Darling, who's at Darling Ventures. Faden interviewed this guy. So Daniel is a great resource. So he's got a VC fund. I think he's based in Melbourne. Yeah, check that one out. It's really good. Thank you again to our sponsors, Macquarie, AWS, KPMG, and IAG Pharmark. Let me click stop, and I'm going to shut up and jump into the networking. So thanks. I've been Ian Gardner, Innovation Base, here to support you. So I'll see you in the chat.